It's absolutely important to value nature. Without it, no COP26 can actually work going forward, because it's not just about carbon capture, it's about rural livelihoods and employment.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Ranjit. And, honestly, I've been in this area, sometimes very deeply engaged, sometimes standing at the sidelines, watching and seeing through the foundations that I work with, the impact to livelihoods, the impact to health, the impact to water security, the impact to even the ability to reach out to communities and societies in a big way. And one thing I'm convinced at the end of it all, everyone says GDP and green domestic product and gross domestic product and see it as two sides of the same coin. I don't even think that it's two sides of the same coin. It's the same coin, honestly, because the moment you start to bucket them, you start to kind of, create the typical, us and them kind of scenario. I don't think there is a cause for bucketing. I don't think they are two sides of anything. They are part of the integral survival of our planet Earth. So simply put, I think we have, especially in India, and of course, I'm sure that's the case for the rest of the world, some countries have already understood this linkage so powerfully that they make sure that their actions are governed by those linkages in many ways and that they are sensitive to those linkages. But in our country, I think the awareness is just starting, and I am hopeful that we will see the light of day very quickly. We will see the sensitivities very quickly. We'll see the linkages very, very quickly, and they will underpin all policy action, all developmental actions, all commercial actions that we take collectively as a country and as a society. To me, in a country like India, with the population pressures that we have, the playing around with nature is one of the most erroneous strategies that we could ever adopt. And it has implications all around. It has implications for microsystems, livelihoods. It has implications for large-scale societal water security. And you cannot live without water. And the bulk of our rivers emanate in our forests. And if we don't value those forests beyond just seeing them as a source of timber, they are integral to our water security. They are integral to our quality of air. They are integral to our biodiversity. They are integral in many ways to our livelihoods for the communities that surround them and live downstream from all those things that emanate in that forest. So hotspots like Assam, hotspots like the Terai, hotspots like the Satpuras, hotspots like the Western Ghats are all absolutely, absolutely central to the survival of our country. And I don't think we can get away from, living in denial about these at all. The valuation of nature is central, fundamental, and crucial to any balance sheet that we wish to have in India, because our natural assets have to add to our domestic product, whatever title we wish to give it. If we don't have a realistic valuation of our natural assets, and we always tend to understate their value to us as a society, we will be doing so at our own peril. There is no doubt about that. We see it already manifesting. We have at least 7 interstate disputes on water. We have international disputes on water with our neighbors. We have huge issues, especially in the northern part of the country, including in the capital city, Delhi, of pollution. It's a smoke and gas chamber. I mean, if this does not open our eyes to the linkages with our natural assets, nothing ever will. You know, so I think there is no question, Ranjit, that nature and its appropriate value and valuation is critical to drawing up the balance sheet of India. Okay. And the more we have of that, the richer we are as a country in every sense, in a psychological, emotional sense, in a sociological security sense, and in pure economic sense. Because if we do not have a problem with our water sources, if we do not have problem with the quality of air, if we have benefits on health because our environments are good, our water is clean, all of that takes away from the many costs which we have. I mean, I'm involved with healthcare in the Hinduja Foundation, and the amount of waterborne diseases and the quantum of money that we spend to fix those problems, if we just planted trees and if we just took care of the trees that we had, we'd probably be spending half the amount. You know, we live in denial, we destroy what we have, and then deal with the toxicity and the pollution and the problems that loss of natural habitat has created. You know, so there are many things we need to do. One is, to my mind, we need to value our natural assets realistically and not to underestimate it. Number two, it has to form part of our national balance sheet. Number three, we need to estimate the increasing costs of a green cover that is being progressively destroyed. So it's not just the absolute value, it is also the additional relativity that is created in terms of all the problems that the loss of natural habitat has. You know, you have social unrest, you have issues like we had. To give you a very small microscopic example, we have a lot of work we do in a taluk called Jawahar in Palghar district of Maharashtra. It's a tribal hilly terrain, and the water situation is, you know, quite dire there. So women go downhill a few kilometers every day to fetch water. And what was happening is, because of the weight that they were carrying, and sometimes with a child on their hip and these big, you know, pots of water on their hip and their head, they would climb back up. And by 30, a lot of them had uterine displacements. You know, so you can't imagine the fallout of things like water insecurity or the water lack of availability. Today, for example, we have solar-powered water pumps bringing the water from the valley down below to the village. Not only has the health parameter increased and the metrics changed, they've also got spare time for better pursuits on livelihood. So the linkages are elaborate. It is not a, you know, just one simple linkage of giving water security. I think our forests guarantee us water, they guarantee us health, they guarantee us time for livelihood, they guarantee us the economics of a better quality of life. Fundamentally, that's the point I wanted to make.
Oh, thank you, Paul. That is very good. See, as a career banker, you've, I think, spanned from 2 banks, a career of almost 40 years. Meaning, what have you seen has been driving motive of banks across the world, not just your bank, is post-Bretton Woods. Everybody seems to have said better, brighter, faster, cheaper. Unless you keep giving returns every 3 months and every 6 months, somehow people are not happy. This greed for only one side or the same coin or half of it is actually what has driven us to this poverty of thought and poverty of implementation. You put it so brilliantly, and you've covered actually the entire value chain of life, meaning you've not just talked about trees and what trees do, and like in Indian philosophy, meaning Mother Earth is Mother Earth. We cannot destroy it, because the moment you destroy it, you've had it. You can use the milk of it, but you cannot actually destroy it, otherwise there'll be no more milk. So you've said it very well, but I have a question. Why isn't the Prime Minister, and we've actually made this proposal 2 years ago, standing up and actually saying, this is the ecological budget of our country, this is the ecological assets we had last year, this is how much it has increased this year in these 5 parameters, which is water, renewable energy, tree cover, food, employment in rural areas, and actually industries that are made out of this. If he covers it, and then saying, now my finance minister will present the finance budget, then you've automatically got the leadership role given, because the Prime Minister is in charge of our assets and the finance minister is in charge of the financial assets, including the nature capital. Well, how does this resonate with you?
Ajit, there's a fairly long answer to what is a very, very fundamental and basic question. Some of it is legacy, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So some time back, we were doing an exercise to value subsoil assets in Odisha. And, trying to say, what does that state have by way of its mineral resources and things like that? And one of the unfortunate realities of India especially is that wherever there is a subsoil asset, whether it is coal, manganese, iron, whatever, it's unfortunately sitting in the bottom of many thick forests in our country. So if you look at the Jharkhand, Orissa, Bihar, that tri-junction, it's a thickly forested area, but it's also sitting on tons and tons of minerals. And so willy-nilly, some of these debates have become about, if you don't allow us to extract those mines, you guys are all unreal, you don't understand the realities of the world. But I think a lot of that in this day and age, with the way technology has moved ahead, is very misplaced. I mean, for example, to my mind, I think our dependence on alternates is still very low compared to where we should actually be. Whether it is solar, whether it is wind, whether it is tide, with the kind of coastlines we have, with the kind of sunshine we have in our country, with the kind of wind power we have in some parts of our country, I think we are so well placed for the development of alternate energy and making that a bulk of our energy, and not have things like thermal powered energy. I think those days are gone. And I think the Prime Minister is also recognizing that a little bit now. There are certain states which are recognizing that ahead of the center and possibly taking more aggressive action. But I think the center is also recognizing that, because I know that in some of our discussions on water security, the departments are much more amenable today because they realize the connections. They are also now seeing the connections to deforestation, for example, in Uttarakhand. The number of landslides and the destruction in the hills that is happening is alarming. See that in Kerala, we have so much by way of floods and so much by way of, issues with respect to disruption of livelihood, all because we have been insensitive in the way we've managed our natural assets. And I think it is changing, and I think the pace will pick up. But yes, you're right. I wish we had this thing of proudly saying This is our natural asset. This is how we value it. And this is how it adds or takes away from the overall assessment of our gross domestic product or gross national product or any other economic parameter that we wish to measure. So I'm hopeful because I see some changes on the ground, and I think it's no more a case of hiding your head in the sand like an ostrich. The whole world is aware. And so today, if any politician tells me that there is still that old construct of, development versus, extraction, blah, blah, dams for development and mines for development, I think that they are choosing to not listen to the real arguments and the real economics and the real equations.
No, thank you for that, Paul. That's very clear. Ecology and economy are the same thing. You're saying that valuation of nature is a must. You're also saying that I wish we could actually present a natural asset budget or the ecological budget of the country.
At least one part of our economy, there is the world of government and the things that government does, whether building infrastructure or whether supporting social issues, etc. There is the other big part, which is the private sector. And I think private sector, to my mind, can also be encouraged to kind of be much more mindful only when they see a direct benefit or lack of the benefit thereof in their actions. And that can be done, to my mind, if investors get sensitive to these factors, whether it is asking for their environmental footprint or whether their commitment to CSR or their actions in trying to stem or reverse their ecological footprints. I think some of that, when it relates directly to the financing that is available and the future view that is taken on them by investor communities, then this will become real. This will become something that everyone will become sensitive to, and they will start falling in line. To the extent that I think this is not something you want to whip people into compliance. I think it's more in terms of saying, listen, it's good for you in the long run. If you minimize your footprints, if you don't irresponsibly consume, then it's good for your future, because then me as an investor, I feel more comfortable investing in you. That thing will also make a big difference.
No, very well said. I think with that, we will carry on these discussions again. Thank you, Paul, for finding time for such an important subject, and apologies for the short notice. We hope you can join in whenever possible, and please give your comments and type it in as you see the conference. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And look forward to welcoming you to the natural assets that we have planted in the Northeast. We have done 5 million. Our target is 100 million. And we look forward to showing you this and taking your advice on how to make it better.
Thank you, Ranjit. And so happy to hear about what you're doing in the Northeast.
Thank you so much, and look forward to welcoming you there. Take care, my dear.
Bye-bye.